All right, well, welcome to this podcast that's going to be released in May alongside the book that we're all here to talk about, a Festschrift honoring Dr. Andreas Köstenberger called That You May Believe, Essays on John. And I'm joined by a wonderful cast of scholars, editors, contributors that helped this book, former students, myself included. So we're really glad to talk about this book and talk about the impact and life and ministry of Dr. Kostenberger. We have the man here himself, so we're glad to hear from you. My name's Quinn. Let me just introduce myself first, and then we'll go around. I was a research assistant for Dr. Kostenberger and a former student, and we've just become really good friends over the years. He stayed at my house a number of times. I'm going to stay at his house this summer, so I really value that friendship and mentorship. I am wrapping up my PhD work at Midwestern Baptist Theological Seminary. I'm on full-time staff at my church, Warnell Road Baptist Church in Kansas City, and that's a little bit about me. We'll start with Dr. Yarbrough. Why don't you just say, who you are, where you're at, what you're doing, what your role was in this project, and then maybe a little bit about your relationship with Dr. Köstenberger.
Well, yeah, I'm Robert Yarbrough. I teach New Testament and Greek and whatever else they tell me to teach here at Covenant Theological Seminary in St. Louis, Missouri, USA. And my ties with Dr. Köstenberger go back to the 1990s. I think the first time I met him was when I was interviewing for a New Testament position at Trinity Evangelical Divinity School. And that's when we first made our acquaintance.
Goes way back.
Yeah.
And you were, I don't know if you said this, you helped edit the book alongside.
I am a co-editor along with Quinn Mosier and Desi Alexander of this book.
When I was proposing this book to publishers, I thought, well, I can't just propose it. I got to get a big hitter. And so you were my first email, and I'm really glad that you said yes.
Yeah.
You were really helpful.
Thanks for all your work too.
Yeah. Dr. Alexander, I know your relationship with Dr. Köstenberger has primarily been literary, through emails, calls, things like that. Why don't you introduce yourself and just tell us a little bit about that relationship?
Hey, I'm Desi Alexander to my friends, Desmond Alexander when it comes to publications. And I'm just retiring from teaching at Union Theological College in Belfast and hoping still to continue to do some writing and researching as the Lord enables. My connection with Andreas goes back, I think, probably to a project to do with the New Dictionary of Biblical Theology, which came out in 2000. And then over the years, we have, I think, shared on several different projects. Most notably for me, I think, was when he kindly asked me to contribute a chapter for his book on mission to the ends of the earth, Salvation to the Ends of the Earth, the second edition of that. So my area of expertise is Pentateuch and Old Testament, and so when you were kind enough to invite me to come in and offer some guidance as regards the section of the book that deals with John's use of the Old Testament, and so that was my humble contribution to this volume, which I hope will honor Andreas very well.
That's wonderful. Yeah, we teed it up for you, and you certainly hit the ball far. So, Dr. Rowe, why don't you have a long history too with Dr. Köstenberger? That's studied with him. Why don't you say a word?
Yeah, it's great to be here. My name is Jimmy Rowe. I'm an associate pastor and director of our institute at McLean Bible Church here in the Washington, D.C. area. I was first acquainted with Dr. Köstenberger when I was a pastor in Chicago and was considering further studies, was exploring at that time doctoral studies. I had studied at Trinity alongside Dr. Yarbrough when actually he was teaching there and was interested in John's Gospel, and had heard of Andreas Köstenberger's work, was a great admirer of his commentary and his theology on John's Gospel and letters. And so I reached out to him back in 2015. I'm not sure if he remembers that time, and he was very gracious and invited me to come begin my studies there at Southeastern, and then continued onward and finished at Midwestern Seminary.
That's great. Yeah, we got to work side alongside each other briefly for him together when you were at Midwestern. So
Yep,
that's right.
yeah, that was a sweet time. And the man himself, Dr. Köstenberger, you want to introduce yourself?
sure. Well, I'm originally from Vienna, Austria, speaking German. Not as well as Dr. Yarbrough, but we've enjoyed conversing and corresponding in German over the years. We've also collaborated on various projects related to the Swiss-German scholar Adolf Schlatter, who we both have great affection for and for his work. I was converted to Christ in my early 20s through the witness of an American opera student while I was traveling on a night train from Vienna to Venice, and subsequently read through the Bible twice in about 6 months, cover to cover. I'd never read the Bible up to that point, and I trusted Christ and had a very strong sense of calling, not just to salvation, but also to serve Him in ministry. So I went to Columbia. Back then, it was called Columbia Graduate School of Bible and Missions, now Columbia International University, where I earned my Master of Divinity, met my wife, got married, and then we went to Chicago to Trinity, where I studied under Don Carson. I wrote my doctoral dissertation on the Johannine commissioning passage, John 20:21, as the Father sent me, so I'm sending you. And then taught at various seminaries, first in Canada, then at Trinity for a year, and then, as you mentioned, Southeastern, Midwestern for the last 30 years or so. Most recently, my wife and I started a hospitality and coaching ministry for Christian leaders, pastors, missionaries out of our home, where we offer 3 to 5 day personalized retreats. So that's a new venture. Marnie and I really enjoy partnering in that. And, it's a way for us to leverage our experience of training seminary students and Christian leaders, and combining that with my wife's love for people and for hospitality.
That's wonderful. And we've been so encouraged by your ministry, your writings, your teachings for the last over a few decades. And so we're really happy to honor you with this and hope you feel that way. You've been involved in Festschrifts in the past. You've edited them, you've contributed it. Now, what's it like to have your own? What were some of the initial thoughts that you had?
Well, yeah, Bob and I co-edited the Festschrift for Don Carson, and that was a wonderful privilege. But yes, it's a great honor, and it's certainly one that you don't expect. So it's a wonderful surprise. It makes you look back on the great ride of writing and research over 3 decades now, starting with my dissertation, as I mentioned, and various contributions to scholarship on various topics I'm passionate about, marriage and the family, John's Gospel, Paul's letters to Timothy and Titus, and I'm extremely grateful for the honor, and also for the hard work, Quinn, for your organizational savvy and convincing a publisher to take this on in what are sort of lean years in some ways. and also grateful for all the contributors to care to contribute and for the hard work they spent on writing those essays.
Yeah, I actually remember the the way the project kind of came to be. You were at my house. It was your birthday. I don't know if you remember this. You had a seminar. My wife usually makes blueberry muffins if it's your birthday. So we were at my kitchen table eating, and I remember saying, "Hey, aren't you about the age where you have a Festschrift usually?" And you said, "Yeah, I think so." I said, "Well, is there one for you?" And you said, "I don't know. And if there was, I don't think I'd know about it." So that started just
True.
the investigation of seeing if there was one out there, and then yeah, getting the ball rolling. Well, the volume's titled That You May Believe, which is a clear nod to John 20:31. John's intention, he's writing these things so that you may believe. How has that verse kind of shaped your own engagement with John? It was an intentional choice, given that you're not just wanting to do scholarship for scholarship's sake, but you've always been really passionate about doing scholarship for the glory of Christ and so that others might believe in him and find life in his name. Can you speak a little bit about how that verse has maybe impacted
Sure.
your view of Johannine studies?
Yeah, that's a great question, Quinn. John 20:31, of course, is John's purpose statement, and the perennial discussion is whether John wrote primarily for believers or unbelievers. So it's kind of ironic that John gives us the only purpose statement that we have in any of the Gospels, and yet we're still not entirely sure what he means. I have a new commentary coming out in the EEC series with Lexham and next year, and in that commentary, I actually spent quite a bit of time commenting on that verse, and I noticed that it comes right on the heels of John 20:28 and 29, the Thomas episode, where you have an unbelieving believer, so to speak, which shows, I think, that our need categories often break down, and John gives us quite a spectrum ranging from belief to unbelief. So I certainly think That You May Believe is a great title, because clearly for John, whether or not a person believes, is of vital importance. It determines their eternal destiny. So that's one of the many things I love about John's gospel, the clarity and the focus.
Yeah. Well, I'd love, to just talk about a bit about why we shaped the book the way we did. Your range of interests is pretty broad. Like you're known for John. You've written a lot on marriage and the family. You've written a lot on hermeneutics, biblical theology. It kind of just, a large range. So one initial idea was, well, maybe we'll have multiple parts just doing different things. Like this will be the John section. This will be the marriage family section. This will be the BT section. But then, if a book is so scattered like that, it might not be. We wanted the book to be useful too to readers, not just merely a Festschrift, but also a Festschrift that like contributes something that helps people along. So we kind of decided to narrow the focus and just do the Gospel of John. And I think that was a good choice. There's great essays. We kind of approached it like exegesis, BT, and then sort of systematic theology, but also everything else, kind of a grab bag, part 3. Maybe we'll go around and talk about the book is structured in this way. So part 1, exegeting John, part 2, John in the canon, and we provocatively put John in the synoptics in there because we do the whole Old Testament and then John's used the synoptics, which was actually, I don't know if you remember this was our first ever conversation at the Mathena Student Center was on John in the synoptics, so it kind of came full circle. And then the last part, Johannine theology and scholarship. So Dr. Yarbrough, your section that you helped edit was exegeting John. Do you just want to speak to that section, some of the chapters in there, what your experience was like looking at those essays, anything else you have to say about that?
Sure. Well, one thing I'll say is, like, I think we feel with respect to all these sections, they're woefully inadequate to do justice either to the biblical material or to Dr. Köstenberger. So, these are just some samples of exegeting John. It's not a program, or it's not something that covers all the gospel. So we've got four, I think, great John scholars: Darrell Bock, Alexander Stewart, L. Scott Kellum, and Paul Anderson. And one of them deals with Andres' own PhD topic, sending, how important that sending is in John's gospel. Another one does a word study and does it in the light of epigraphic evidence in Anatolia. And then we get a theological treatment of what must be, Andres, one of your favorite sections of John. If you love John, then you love John 13 through 17, because so much that's central about Jesus' own theology comes out there. We've got, I think, a wonderful section on that, especially because it contains the word that is in my seminary's name, covenant. It's the covenant texture of the farewell scenes. And so I think that's just a great wedding of a concept with 4 chapters that, are so variegated, it's easy to get lost in them because they talk about so many things. And then we get Paul Anderson, and he writes about the Christ hymn. And that's at the end, but it's, takes us back to the foundation, to kind of round off that section. So I was just gratified by the range of authors and by the different kinds of emphases, and everything from Anatolian epigraphics to the high priestly prayer and theology. So in that sense, it does do justice, because it covers a wide range of the wealth that we're going to find in John's gospel.
Yeah, that's wonderful. And one of the things that's fun about this Festschrift is you have people that haven't maybe necessarily like focused a ton in John, writing on John. Like Darrell Bock's done so much in Luke Acts. Tom Schreiner's done so much in Paul. We'll get to Tom Schreiner's later, but his was kind of funny. He's like, well, I haven't done much in John. And I was like, just pick anything. It'll be great, So, and there's a wide cast. Yeah, Paul Anderson, at George Fox University, I think it is. Yeah, it was really happy to have him come. And yeah, it's great cast of contributors. Dr. Alexander, do you want to speak to your section, John in the Canon, and kind of similarly to what Dr. Yarbrough just did?
Sure. Well, John in the Canon is really an attempt to try and observe how John makes use, particularly of the Old Testament. So there are actually three essays dealing with the Pentateuch, the Torah, and then the prophets and the writings. Jimmy contributed the chapter to do with the prophets, and Greg Goswell has written on the writings, and I've done something on the Pentateuch. And then to complement that, then Quinn explored John's relationship to the Synoptic Gospels. And I suppose, particularly, I think for someone like myself, I'm not a Johannine expert, but having to think in a fresh way about how John may have used particularly the Pentateuch, it was stimulating and refreshing, and I think that's for me part of the joy of being involved in a Festschrift, and is actually being able to share with other scholars their particular expertise, and to have a sense of what they can bring to the occasion and to the book. So I think there's a richness in the book because you have so many different people contributing to it, bringing their own expertise and their own insights. I suppose as an editor, there are perhaps occasions when you may not necessarily agree with what someone else wants to say, but it's always good to be exposed to other ideas. So I've really enjoyed being part of the project, and I hope that you will find it stimulating also, Andreas.
Yeah, that's great. John is so soaked in the Hebrew Bible. It was only appropriate that there's a section dealing with John's own love for the scriptures and
Mhm.
how these themes and writings find their way into his own gospel. Um, Dr. Rowe, you contributed in that section on John and the prophets, which sounds to me like climbing Mount Everest. Where do you even start? Like, there's so much material there. You also worked on this in your doctoral studies. Can you just speak a little bit about what it was like trying to tackle that beast and how maybe some of your past work influenced it?
Sure. It was a joy to contribute that essay there to this volume, and I was very appreciative of Dr. Cosper's work on John's use of the Old Testament through several essays and throughout his work. He was very conscious of John's um, use of the Old Testament, thorough use of the Old Testament, and so in a few of his essays, he tried to point to the significance of Isaiah in John's thought and in his presentation of Christ. And so I picked up on that in my dissertation topic and wrote on John's use of Isaiah in thinking about not only the important Isaiah quotations in his gospel, but also the many allusions and how that shaped John's Christology in particular. And so, so it was a joy actually to work more thoroughly within the whole prophetic corpus there, and to think about all the other allusions and quotations. You know, thinking about quotations to Zechariah and allusions to Ezekiel and other prophetic texts. And so it gave me just a chance to kind of step back and think about how John is thinking about the prophetic message, you know, about Christ in specific ways. And so it was a delight to think about that and contribute that to this work.
Yeah, thanks so much for writing it. And I remember, Dr. Alexander, I think when I sent you his chapter, you sent an email back that's like, this is fantastic, like in particular. So we're really happy that that chapter's in there.
Yes.
It's a wonderful chapter. Well, I did part 3, Johannine Theology and Scholarship. I felt like the subtitles were going strong until this section. That how do you even describe this section? You know, so we threw in theology and scholarship because, as Dr. Yarbrough's chapter shows, we're wanting to see how has John also developed within academic New Testament scholarship. And I'll actually start with Porter's and then go to his. But Stan Porter wrote on the current state of Johannine studies. Great person to write on this, just having published so broadly, kind of assessing the landscape previously, and just has such a deep knowledge of the secondary literature that that's a really helpful chapter, especially maybe even for students who will read this book to just kind of know where are things at, like what could I maybe help contribute here. So that was a great chapter. It was our longest chapter, but we gave him a little bit more room to work with. Dr. Yarbrough, thank you for writing John and Theologies of the New Testament since Gabler, critical and canonical. I thought the way that you use that lens to assess so many different writers, even modern writers. I think, don't you cover Schnabel in there in your chapter, who's a contributor to this volume? It's just wonderful, and again shows your knowledge, your deep knowledge and expertise in the area, and was really happy for you to write that. The reception of John's gospel in the early church, Michael Kruger, who better to write about the early church than Michael Kruger? His chapter was one of my favorites. It just felt so new, fresh, exciting. Of course, he's citing manuscripts I've never even heard of, and I think it'll be really helpful. It's a great chapter. Dr. Allison, The Eternal Procession of the Holy Spirit and the Gospel According to John, probably our most dogmatic essay.
Mhm.
Wonderful just meditation on the Holy Spirit. You guys wrote a book on the Holy Spirit together, so it was really sweet to have him write on that. Probably in a move that shocks us all, he deals a lot with Thomas Aquinas in a book on John, which is it's actually really edifying and really helpful. So it's a great chapter. Tom Schreiner, Born Again in Johannine Thought. he is actually looking at 1 John. So we go outside the gospel, go to the letters. Again, obviously in typical Schreiner fashion, is a great essay.
Yeah.
And then Eckhard Schnabel closes us out in Revelation. How fitting to close us out in the last book of the New Testament. God's presence and the absence of tears. Does a lot of work in the original languages in that chapter. Probably, well, I won't say too much, but I remember doing the page proofs, and there's just so much Greek in a line and a list down the road. So, and it's also very the subject, the absence of tears, just thinking about how God will right every wrong, and He will, take away the suffering of His people. It was really like devotional chapter 2 in the midst of being so high up here. But that's kind of the landscape of the Festschrift. You haven't read it yet, but you will. And now I guess you're,
Can't wait.
I don't know, chomping at the bit to read it.
Absolutely. Yeah. I'm just amazed at the the first grade lineup of contributors and just the intriguing choice of topics as well. Just that really whet my appetite all over again, hearing those summaries.
Yeah, it was good. We had a structure, but we had each author kind of, maybe we would suggest something to write, but then a lot of these are their own ideas, and it really just fit together super well. So I'm really excited about it. I'm excited for it to come out. I hope you feel honored by it. We just wanted to really thank you for how much you've given to the church and the academy over the span of your ministry. And in typical Johannine fashion, here's a John book.
Thank you. Yeah, I love the depth of engagement with the Johannine literature from so many different angles, and just the depth of expertise, and even like you said, sometimes matching non-Johannine scholars with Johannine topics. I mean, certainly I would rush out to buy this volume the moment it comes out.
Yeah, we're really excited. It's coming out in May, I believe late May. It's somewhere in the 20s. I should probably know that, but the date has changed a couple times, so I'm hesitant to just give an exact date. But we do plan on it being out in May. There's also going to be a reception, a ceremony for you in Raleigh, where you're at, June 7th, right?
Mm-hmm.
Do you remember the time? Is it 11 a.m.?
Yeah, it's 11 a.m. at the Fellowship Raleigh Church.
Yeah, so we're looking forward to presenting the book to you physically there, and we'll have a copy. And then you can go home and read it in 2 hours or however fast your brain processes things.
Yeah, can't wait.
But any last word from any of you, or else not, we'll just wrap up.
Thanks, Andreas.
Quinn, just a big thank you, Quinn, to you.
Yeah, no, it was a delight to work on it with you all. So, yeah. Dr. Yarbrough, were you going to say something? Sorry.
I just was going to say how much fun it was, Andreas, to work on Kennen wir Jesus together.
Yes.
And I don't know how you did it, but I dictated my chapters, and the secretary at TED's transcribed it all.
Right.
And then I went through and corrected the transcription. So a lot of these things, and looking at your list of publications, I know a lot of our writing, we do it on a shoestring.
Yep.
We've got deadlines, and there's a limitation to how much you can research, and it just was so much fun to do that work together. So thanks for that opportunity.
Right. We each did 6 months worth of that devotional, and it's such a historic work. His final work right at the beginning of World War II, and it's sort of a final testament, if you will, and so inspiring, right? His love for Jesus. He was, I think, in his 80s at the time, and still going strong.
And for those listening who don't know, this is Schlatter, I'm assuming.
Yep.
And what's that work?
Do we know Jesus?
Okay.
It's a crazy thing for a German theologian to ask a country that's supposed to be 100% either Catholic or Protestant, but he knew that there weren't that many Christians in Germany. So he asked the question, kennen wir Jesus? Do we know Jesus? And as you read the book, you can see at times he's upbraiding the German readers and saying, you're really not getting it. And also he goes after Hitler, and he goes after National Socialism in a number of places in this book. It's kind of veiled, but not really. So
and
it's an important book at a lot of levels.
yeah, in the year 1938.
And this was the first thing you guys worked on together, is that right?
Well, Women in the Church was the
Okay, predated it.
first.
Okay.
And we worked indirectly. One of the major things Andreas did, he translated the almost 1,000 pages of Schlotter's 2-volume New Testament theology.
Yeah.
And once he got that all translated, then I read through it all.
Yeah.
And we corresponded on the wording of that. So that was a lot of, I spent over 40 hours on each of those 2 volumes.
Yeah.
So much work. And
Yeah.
I mean, I feel like I have crazy stories about how fast you work, Dr. Köstenberger. Like I remember you wrote your biblical theology with Goswell during COVID, I think it was. And I remember I was your research assistant at the time, and you just fired off a manuscript super fast. And I remember thinking, oh, this is probably going to have a lot of things needing correcting. And then when I was looking through it, it was like fully footnoted and things. So it was, it was a joy to work on. Dr. Rowe, were you going to say something?
I was just about to say, I think that's a great example of Dr. Köstenberger's rigorous scholarship. I remember when I was an assistant of his, he introduced me. He was my German teacher as well. He introduced me to a German word that maybe you can help me with. Maybe Dr. Yarbrough, you can help me with as well. It meant something like stay seated in a chair and don't get up until you get the job done.
Oh yeah, Sitzfleisch.
And that stuck with me even to this day.
Even if you can't pronounce the word, it's like the word's hanging in your office reminding you.
That's right.
Well, guys, thank you so much for hopping on this podcast. We're really excited to have this book release, and each one of your contributions was so helpful to the book, and it was great to work with you all. So looking forward to it coming out. Thanks for joining us.
You're welcome.